Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Meepleville Meets. Today, we have a really wonderful guest coming to us from the great north, our next door neighbor from Canada, from the very, very popular YouTube channel. That is Watch It Played. Please welcome Rodney Smith to the show. Hello, Rodney.
Hey there, Tim. How are you? Greetings from the north.
Greetings from the north. Yes, and thank you so much for joining us today. So that is one of the things I want to kind of get into right away, Rodney, because you are from Canada, and actually, going through this, and I'm sorry, folks, that's my cat in the background.
I can hear your cat. Your cat has a lot of questions for me. Did we have the cat come in and talk?
Yes, but I just want people to know I'm not neglecting a baby, because I know she sounds like a baby. That is a cat. It really is. But I found out, while we were trying to schedule this, that you're actually so far east, you're a time zone east of Standard Eastern Time.
Right. Eastern Time doesn't know what it's talking about. There's further east than that. I don't like that it's called Eastern Time, because I'm Easter than Eastern Time.
That is true.
Atlantic time.
Yeah. And just to give you a little personal thing, when I was younger, because my parents are really pot smoking, bell bottom wearing hippies.
Sure.
In the early 70s, we used to go from the Bay of from Portland, Maine, take the Prince of Fundy ferry up to the Bay of Fundy, and we used to travel around out there in Nova Scotia and all that kind of stuff. And that's the part of Canada you're from, correct?
That's right. So I don't live in Nova Scotia now, but that's where I was born. I spent most of my life in Nova Scotia. We moved to Prince Edward Island, which is not that far away. About 10 years ago, I think it was now. So yeah, that's definitely my area. In fact, Maine was a popular U.S. trip for us to make. Not on the ferry typically, but we would drive down to Maine. So there's a little pollination there, I think.
Oh yeah,
our families.
I've been to Prince Edward Island several times and all that.
Yeah.
Have you ever heard of a campground called Five Islands by any chance?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So did they stay there?
That's where we used to go. Yeah.
Oh, no kidding.
Five Islands, Prince Edward Island. But anyway, so
what a small world, isn't it wild? Like, Tim, what are the odds that you and I would have ever met? I know, right? Except for this hobby, and yet there's those little connections too, right? Yeah. Outside of the hobby. That's wild.
That is true. So what I want you to maybe enlighten me a little bit, and also the audience, is since you're sort of like a really Eastern part, but you do spend a lot of time in America.
I do, yeah.
Board game conventions and, maybe doing other things. Do me a favor and just talk a little bit, like give somebody like me and any other American or anybody from other part of the world, some of the sort of differences, the cultural differences you may notice about Canada and America that we just, like somebody like me who isn't have as much cross connection as you do, may not be aware of.
Well, that's an interesting question, Tim, because I think growing up Canadian, especially, I mean, a lot of what I think anyone growing up experiences of their sense of identity, a lot of it comes through, particularly in North America, through television and movies and music and things like that. And I feel like as a Canadian, there's a tendency to feel a little bit like you're the younger sibling to an older sibling. I have an older brother and older sister. I know what it's like to be a little bit in their shadow when you're growing up. And I always looked up to my brother. He had like a sports car and like all kinds of cool stuff, and he had money and things, and it was all very flashy and cool. And I think sometimes as Canadians, you get a little bit of that feeling, even a little bit of envy of your neighbor, because America on the world stage particularly is bigger, it's louder, everything, it's all to the nth degree, and there's something to be admired in that. But and I remember too, anytime I was watching television and America would say anything about Canada or like show an awareness at all that we existed, it was like everyone would bolt up and go, "Hey, they just mentioned us. They know we're here." We did something to fit on their radar. But I think as as I found, even with my own siblings, as I aged, I started to assume my own identity and start to see some of those differences and recognize there's probably some value in some of those differences. I mean, I think, there's very basic things like, going across the border, you realize like when you order food, it comes like you get like a full day's worth in one meal. Like everything's bigger. Everything's like much bigger there. But then there's other things too. I mean, look, you could look on the and even in politics. Obviously, right now America is going through a very big election. America has a two-party system. Canada has more like a four-party system with a bunch of other little smaller parties as well.
This is more a parliamentary system, correct?
Yeah, that's right. Parliamentary as well. So like we do have what would be equate to kind of a Republican and Democrat. Like we have conservatives and liberals, but then we have the new Democrat Party and the Parti Québécois, the Green Party. Anyway, and there are interesting things I think that changes in the political spectrum, because it's not nearly as polarizing in that way. Even though certain parties might tend to have more power, it divides the conversation up in ways that I think sometimes are good. You get more perspectives. Have more things to consider.
Right, but what about like say the food and because you speak English like we do, and there's not that much of a different accent like England or whatever, you know what I mean? Because for example, I lived in England for 4 years, and how it was sort of like a twilight zone for me is where it was so close, but at the same time so different, right?
Yeah.
So I really want to know if I were to do, or if I or any other American or Canadian were to wake up, say, in your town all of a sudden one night, what are the things, or what is it that they would be like, wait a second, I'm not in the US anymore? Do you know what I mean? Are there
it's funny because things that aren't in Canada that are in the US eventually end up here. So like I would have said to you, Starbucks would be something you wouldn't find at Starbucks. You'd find like Tim Hortons, which is kind of the more popular coffee shop here. But now there's Starbucks everywhere because business just goes where people are. You know what I mean? But I mean, there are certain food and cultural differences. I mean, I'm sure you've heard of poutine, which is a popular Canadian snack or food here, or a meal. But
let me ask you something though, Rodney. Is that Canadian, or is it more specific to just that one province, right?
It's become almost ubiquitous now, I think. Like poutine, as I understand it, originated primarily in like French cities, Quebec and that area, right? But it has become, again, one of those things that people latch onto and think of as Canadian. And you could go to any Canadian city pretty much and order poutine,
right.
In that way. It's interesting you mentioned about how our dialects are very similar. Our accents are, we have different accents, but similar. The thing I noticed starting the YouTube channel and sort of being in a slightly more public space is how differently I say certain words from Americans. Because I would get comments like, why are you saying cards so funny? Constantly. Like people would spell in the comments, why are you saying KERDS? Because that's how they were hearing it. And I was, of course, I don't hear it any differently. When I talk to an American friend and they say card, I hear what I think I'm saying, but it's obviously not it's not the same, clearly. And the funny thing, just this last year, one of the common comments is the way Canadians say about.
Right.
And often the emphasis on a boot, like they say a boot. And I always thought that was absolute nonsense. Like, I don't know any Canadians who say a boot. And then I was actually listening to a Canadian from out west, I think in British Columbia area, and he very distinctly said a boot. Constantly. I was like, what? This is a real thing.
But not only that, speaking about accents, because the people who are even further east of you, up in Newfoundland, I believe,
that's right,
have a pretty severe accent over there, don't they?
That's right. They have a very strong accent. And not only that, they're a time zone further east than even we are, even than I am.
Really?
There is a half-hour time zone, if you can believe it.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, you're right. We have, very strong different accents around, especially Atlantic Canada too, where I live, has a variety of sort of stronger accents. If you're in Canada, you would sort of know the difference between a Western accent and Eastern accent for sure.
Right. And let's just talk about a little bit about, say, the sort of the kind of big stereotype about Canadians is they're so polite, and you see like people making really severe fun, really, really mean, but they're so polite and do whatever.
Sure. So, we all wear plaid.
Yes. Yeah. There you go. But honestly, when you spend a lot of time in America and just say you're in a social situation, in a Starbucks, out in the street, and you're around primarily Americans, do you feel it, or is there a noticeable difference between us and you as far as that goes?
It's an awkward thing to talk about a little bit, right? Because it's kind of like, if I say yes, I feel like you guys aren't as nice. That doesn't seem like a very nice thing to say. So it goes counter to my own wiring, you see, as a Canadian. Right. But no, I think I do notice a difference. I remember the first times I traveled more actively in the US, I was surprised. I mean, I made this joke. It's a bit of an exaggeration, but there was a couple of times where, someone was handing me my change back and I said, thank you. and they looked at me like, why are you like there was this like weird look on their face of, you don't need to thank me for giving you your money back. It was like,
right.
And I realized, oh, okay, so maybe that's not the norm. Some of those niceties or whatever that I just don't even think about. I sometimes think, I've tried to theorize about why is that? How did Canadians get this sort of strange but kind of nice stereotype? And I think I wonder sometimes if it isn't our weather a little bit. There's always like the talk about it's cold, and we do have pretty severe winters, and it does kind of put you in this position where you are always sort of relying on your neighbors a little bit. You know what I mean? Like if we get a big storm and I can't get out of my driveway and the power's out, I need my neighbors to be nice to me, and we need each other. And that sort of reliance that we're sort of suffering through something together, something a little harsher, a little more rugged. I sometimes wonder if that doesn't have some kind of aggregate effect on Canadians as a whole. Maybe.
That makes perfect sense. And I could definitely see how, that would. Absolutely. But also about, like, say, products, especially let's talk about games, because you had mentioned how Starbucks came later, things come later to Canada,
right?
Now, let's just sort of like bring about like the world of gaming, how accessible, and say not for somebody like you who is in board gaming, but like a person who wasn't like you but wanted a Euro game. So how accessible, say, or instant do games get there as opposed, you know what I mean? Like how about things like that?
Yeah, I know. I do understand what you're saying. We don't have quite as many board game distributors here, which was the traditional method, and still remains the traditional method for getting games, right? Retailers order from a distributor, and then it comes to your shop, and then you can buy it that way. But I would say today, there's not too much of a lag in terms of like when you might see something in North America versus in the US and when you might see it in Canada. Now, some of my retailer friends would beg to differ, I'm sure, because they often complain about the fact that they're trying to place a big order for a popular game and can't get copies of it. Meanwhile, they know it's in the US. But even as someone myself who sometimes has access to games because of the work I do, I feel like whenever I go into my online, Canadian retail stores, or even into my local stores, I'm seeing the products that I'm expecting to see. Wingspan is there, or it's not because it's sold out everywhere. Like the games that you would expect to see tend to be there. We might have to wait a little bit, but it's not like I have, viewers from all over the world, and I'll hear from people in Brazil and places like that, where there's like these very passionate, concentrated groups of gamers who can't get games, or it's very expensive. The mail system's not reliable, or the taxes are just incredibly high. So I feel like there's no space in which, as a Canadian, I could really ever complain, given the number of people who are just passionate with this hobby in all kinds of other remote places that just can't get games. Of course, and honestly, of course, there are small towns in Canada, I'm sure, that have a harder time getting things than larger towns, as it is anywhere, I'm sure, right? But
right. And also, so congratulations on your success, by the way, because Watch It Play is extremely popular. You do a fantastic job. It's not an overnight success. I like to really stress that when I'm talking to a lot of people, because I just want people to know the amount of hard work you've done, the amount of time you put into it, and all that kind of stuff. But I'd like to, before we talk about that, I want to know a little bit more about you. So you're a Canadian by birth and everything. So growing up, like, what were some of your aspirations? Did you go to like college? Did you go to school? Did you do other stuff before Watch It Played? What was life for Rodney before Watch It Played?
Sure. Yeah. No, I did. I went to university, got a bachelor's in commerce. I decided I was going to be an accountant. That's what I decided. Because here's what I believed, Tim. I thought if I could get a job that paid well, then even if my job was a misery, I would have the money and means by which to enjoy the rest of my time. This was the sort of story I told myself, and it made sense to me, And it wasn't like I was not looking forward to potentially being an accountant. It seemed like I was good with numbers, and it seemed like it might be a good fit for me. But I will tell you, as I've gotten older and maybe a little wiser, that's not the way I would advise someone thinking about their future career, and you might agree with this, but
no, but that is like an older school of thought, right?
Yes.
That has been how our grandparents thought, right?
Yeah, I mean, my dad, like, he worked in he moved around a few different jobs, but it was all within the federal government. So he's effectively kind of just climbing the ladder in his career. So he had sort of one job, right? So I had that modeled for me, and that's kind of what I expected I would be trying to do as well. But I'll tell you something, Tim. The thing about your job is that is your life. You know, if you sit there and go, well, I'm going to be an accountant from 9 to 5, that is most of your day. That's the best part of your day. Like, in terms of, so if you're not doing something that you find on some level fulfilling, then trying to find that fulfillment in the off hours with whatever money you've scrounged together, I don't know. Like, it's tough. And not everyone has
Rodney, thank you for bringing that up. And I'm sorry to sort of stray a little bit, but
please.
That's an interesting topic. And I just want to throw this at you because you may be approaching this or looking at this a little bit differently than somebody like me. I believe you. I agree with you. You're 100% correct.
Yeah.
But what I want to get into a little bit about what you brought up is you have the luxury to do that because you have a national healthcare system. So what I'm trying to say is you are able to pursue your passion because if you get sick, you get hurt or whatever, you can get taken care of.
Yeah.
A lot of us Americans don't have that luxury. So although I agree with you, you're coming from it as a different angle. So talk to me a little bit about that, right?
Yeah, that's a fantastic point. Any conversation I ever have about my eventual, and where I am now in YouTube has to do with a lot of other factors that gave me the opportunity to even attempt something like this.
Right.
It's not the sort of thing that you can, I mean, you could just try to make it work, but that is super risky and not advisable. And you could be setting yourself up for a lot of regret. But anyway, what I was, one of the, like, as you said, having a healthcare system where you don't have to worry about getting sick or ill that way. We have slightly better vacation packages generally in our jobs and things like that. A lot of those things give you a certain amount of security. But I guess sort of the main thrust of it is I was just, if money is your goal, if money is your only goal, and at the end of that goal, you want some amount of happiness too, then I'm just saying, I think you have to be careful about focusing in on, if I do something that generates me a lot of money, I will find happiness at the end of that. That part of it, I think, is the piece that you may find it. You may find that money brings you happiness. I don't know. But I think if you can find something that is both going to provide you some amount of income, a comfortable living, and something that you can find some amount of enjoyment in doing or fulfillment. See, the thing is, especially with what I do now, people often say to me, it must be fun doing what you do. And I always want to caution people, because it's not about it being fun. It's not coal mining. Don't get me wrong. But when you're staring down the barrel of shooting like 13 hours of video in a day, it's not that I'm having fun, but at the end of that day, I certainly look back on it and feel a certain amount of fulfillment or satisfaction, right? Yeah. And I would imagine it's, Tim, for you, again, I've been watching your series on the Chronicles of a Small Business, and you discuss a lot of the challenges there. And I would imagine for you, there's a lot of days that can be quite challenging in doing what you're doing.
True. But again, Rodney, what you're saying, and I agree with totally, about how the money should not be the focus. And that I agree with that too, because I don't know if you remember in Canada, I don't know but here it was a big thing maybe 20 years ago, whatever, but there was a book called The Secret that came.
Yeah. Right.
And I was like, well, that's really no secret to me. That's just natural. And the whole premise, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that if you just pursue what you love, if you have your passion, your drive, then good things will just come upon you.
Yeah, but that's like fraught with a whole, I mean, it's tricky, right? Because like I would never want to like promote that notion. Okay. There's a lot of practical realities that butt up against.
Of course there is.
That.
Yeah. No, absolutely true. Yeah. But in essence, though, it is kind of what you're saying, right?
Yeah. On some level, yes. I guess the main thing, I guess if there's one thing to take away from the point, is just be careful in believing that if you can find the thing that will generate you large sacks of money, that at the end of the day, you're necessarily going to be satisfied with how you're spending that time, But money is the answer to a lot of problems. That's also a truth.
But it's good because, like you said, people don't sometimes realize that, because unfortunately, people do look at the end success and they see that and they want that, and they don't realize the hard work it takes to that. Like, they don't understand the 13 hours, like you said, looking into a video camera in your studio and all that kind of stuff, and all the work you've put into that. So let's get into that a little bit. So how did because I was looking at like your original YouTube thing, and so before you like, or say the month before you started filming, what
Yeah.
were some of the decisions leading up to why and how you were going to start this?
Yeah, I mean, well, I should say, before I started Watch It Played, I had a job with the federal government, and
Okay.
I worked full time doing that back in Nova Scotia. My wife had a full time job as well, and we had two young kids. And there was days because of our work schedules where we kind of felt like we were passing in the hall. It wasn't necessarily, I wouldn't say it was causing a strain on our relationship, but we definitely had a conversation where we said, "Is there a way we could do this better, or would be a better fit for us?" And we decided we would see if we could relocate, because with her job, if we relocated to a smaller community, she'd get paid a little more. We'd have to cinch up our belts some, but I could leave the job I was currently at, and we could maybe go down to one income. And that way, whenever she wasn't working, we were all together as a family. So we could try to have a little bit of a better work balance situation. And again, going back to your earlier point, that is something you can entertain a little more easily when you are in a country where your healthcare is taken care of,
Yeah.
and other things like that,
All right.
But so we did try that, and I had a little small business I ran during that time, just a little like personal business where I did some website design and a little bit of media things for the town locally. But I was starting to get a real fascination with the board game hobby. I'd always enjoyed board games growing up, but I'd gotten away from them for a while. And again, young family kind of got in the way of that a little bit. But I started to discover, oh, wow, there's all these other games out here I didn't even know existed. Carcassonne. I think Carcassonne was one of the first games I really found when I re-entered the hobby, and it blew me away. I thought this was just a fantastic, smart little game. And then I discovered Arkham Horror. I know it's quite a jump, but that was kind of my progress. Went from Carcassonne to Arkham Horror, and I discovered this like rich narrative styled story. And again, actually realized, oh, as with a young family, there's actually room for games in my life. I could play these with my kids. We can have these adventures together. And then I just found that obsession continuing to grow. And I wanted to see if there was a way I could connect with the larger gaming community, because living in the small little town I was in, I didn't know any other gamers there. We'd moved at this point to PEI, Prince Edward Island. And I thought maybe if I can make some videos, because I've been watching videos. There was people who were making YouTube videos at that time. This was back in 2010. And some podcasts, and I thought maybe I can do something, but I didn't know what to do exactly. I didn't think I should try to review, because I didn't feel I'd be very good at that. I've always had a bit of difficulty telling strangers what they will or will not like, because I just don't know. But then it dawned on me that there's no one at that time anyway who was showing the games being played or really focusing on teaching the games specifically. And I knew I loved learning rules to games and teaching them. I thought that's the thing I could do. But there was definitely a selfish element to it initially, which was I wanted to connect with this larger gaming community. And so I thought maybe if I make these videos, I can do that. And so that's really how it started, by teaching and playing the first edition of Mansions of Madness on the channel. And I had no big designs about, this would be a career or anything like that. It was just something I wanted to do as a hobby, as a passion project.
Right. And then you said your first was Mansions of Madness, but then I went all the way back to your first. You might have gotten rid of that off your channel, but I've noticed, and I saw I thought it was kind of strange. And tell me about this. The first 13 videos are of one game. I think it's Wrath of Chardalon, right?
Yeah, so I had a different YouTube channel, Rodney J. Smith, and that's where Mansions of Madness sits still today, that first series. Okay. And it was during the recording of that. Now that was like a 20 episode series. Oh, really? Yeah. But it was during the recording of that something happened. I just went like, whoa, I think I'm doing something here that is a really good fit for what I like to do. And the reaction to it, the response to it amongst a very small group of people watching, because I started with 0 subscribers like everybody else, but that little group that started watching seemed to be enjoying it. Mm-hmm. And I felt like, this is a great opportunity. Again, there's nobody else really doing this right now. This was, again, before Tabletop and Will Wheaton or any of that, right? So I think I remember going up to my wife. You talked about in one of your videos, you talked about the importance, if you have a dream for business, to talk to the people in your life about that dream. And I thought that was such a great piece of advice, because even if it's your dream will affect everyone around you, depending on what is involved in that dream coming to fruition. Right?
It will. Yes.
I remember going up to my wife and saying, I think I'd like to keep doing this, but maybe doing it a little more regularly, a little more seriously. because I think if I keep doing it, there might be a possibility to keep doing it, to find a way to turn it into something.
Okay, so let me ask you about that before you go any further.
Sure.
How did you discover the fact that, because just because of the pandemic, because I'm not into you, but I've started doing it because, we've got a lot of time stuck in the house. A lot of people.
Sure. Yeah.
How did you discover that it was possible to make an income or a potential living off of YouTube? Because for me, I just didn't even know that was a thing until, you know what I mean? So how did you discover that? To have this conversation with your wife.
Yeah, it was strange because I didn't have a clear sense in my mind about here's how I will monetize and make. Because the thing is, of course, you can make some money off of YouTube ad revenue, but I knew I was not going to have an audience size, especially in those early years, where I would generate any kind of living wage off of YouTube ad revenue, be pennies of anything, right?
Right.
But I did think that maybe I was doing something of potential value, that fellow gamers who are struggling with rules and rule books might find this to be a complement to their enjoyment of the hobby.
Okay.
I got this game I want to play, this darn rule book, I can't figure it out. If I could just click a button and watch a video, I think that would really help me and I could get to the fun. And I thought, if I do a decent job, maybe if I petition my audience and say, hey, I'd like to be able to keep doing this, would you consider throwing a tip in the tip jar, basically? Maybe I can see if it would generate some income. And I think I did do that relatively early on the first year. It was very simple. Like, hey, if you enjoy this and you want to just drop a little PayPal to me, that'd be great. And a few people did. And that was kind of like the first hint of, okay, people will support this potentially, if I keep doing it. Now, obviously right now my audience size is very small, but if I keep working and keep growing it, then potentially there'd be opportunities to, again, that amount of tips going into the tip jar might grow as well. Right.
Right.
But again, I this is the thing I would caution anyone around this, though. I was not trying to make a career out of it at that point. I was testing, I was seeing if it could, but I was very much prepared to walk away and would have had to have walked away because I was a young parent, 2 kids, I had to make sure I was being a responsible member of my family as well. Right.
Sure. So, but let me ask you a little bit about that, Rodney, because you did approach it, if I'm hearing you correctly, with the intent of being serious, making it sort of a job. You didn't approach it as a hobby, though. Am I hearing that correctly?
No, you're hearing it right. I mean, the nuance, I suppose, is that when I decided there was a chance I could make it work, then I was going to work hard at trying to make it work. But some part of my brain was always ready with a release valve to go, Rodney, if this doesn't work, bail. Fail fast kind of thing.
Yes.
Or not fail fast, but if this is becoming a strain on your family situation financially, if you're not going to be able to make this work with some signs of growth and work, don't hang all your dreams on this. Give yourself a bit of time. That's the kind of conversation I had with my wife. Like, Christy, would you be willing to be the sole breadwinner for our household for the next 6 months while I give this a go and see if I continue to find this fulfilling to do, and if the audience grows, and if there's a connection being made here, if I'm contributing something valuable to the hobby, those sorts of things. If we can prove that that's kind of happening, and potentially if there's some financial support there, maybe then we go to the next stage.
Okay, so let me ask you then a little bit about those stages and the conversations with your wife. So if we're going to use the analogy of baseball with a home run, getting back to home run base, tell me what it was like, say, in the park home run. What it was like at first base, and you were like, okay, and you went to second, third, and then finally coming home where it's like that. So can you maybe talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I can try. So,
okay,
it's difficult because so much of it's based on memory now, right? But
right.
In the early days of it, it was okay. What's a game I can feature that I have an interest in featuring and play through with the audience and get them involved? That was one of the things about my gameplays. Every gameplay would end with a turn over to the audience. What would you like us to do next? Help us vote on the next choice. And then we'd come back and we'd pick up the story there, and we'd keep going, right? And also teaching the games. And so in the beginning, my interest wasn't so much get a certain number of subscribers or get a certain number of views, because I didn't have a lot of control over that.
Right.
I decided to set goals for myself that were things I could control. So, for example, okay, I'm going to cover X amount of games in the next 2 or 3 months. One of the things I did early on too, Tim, I didn't mention this, but once I decided, okay, I'd like to give this a go, and I started talking to my wife a little more seriously about it, is I wrote out what I call Rodney's rules. They were basically just, at that time, I think about 9 or 10 little rules to myself about, okay, Rodney, if this was to keep going and be successful in some way, what are your goals? What are your principles? How are you going to interact with the audience? What if someone's mean or says something rude, or, like just all those little things, just trying to anticipate, or watching YouTube videos myself and going, what do I like and not like? How can I steer the channel towards the things I like? So I had kind of a guideline that I thought would help me, so that if I got into a situation that was maybe a little more stressful, I wasn't have to try to think at that time, what are my principles? Like I would already know what they were. So I had sort of a guiding light to kind of follow, right? I think that helped a lot in those early stages too, because I decided early on, it wasn't going to be about how many viewers can I get, how quickly. It was, how can I create something that each individual person watching feels the connection, rather than just a mass of people sort of, all being fans, quote unquote, of a thing. Right?
Correct. And to me, that's essential, because it seems like early on you discovered that sort of the most important thing was you, because you were your product. So you had to develop what you thought was best of you to come out to your audience, right? Because that's essentially what you're selling, or what your product is.
Right. Yeah, I think you're right. And like, I remember in those early days, my wife would say to me, do you want me to like tell all of our family members about your channel and get them to sign up? And I was like, no, I don't want anyone, because it wasn't because I wanted my family away from it, but I wanted to know that if someone was subscribed to my channel, it was because they had found something there that connected with them. Again, either something of value or a connection to me, or whatever the case may be. I wanted to be able to look at those numbers in those early days and go, these people are signing up because of something I'm doing, or that something this channel represents. Right. I needed that so I could know, am I on the right path or not? If I got a bunch of artificial views or likes, that wasn't going to help me, So the early stages were just consistent work, try to improve the quality, keep doing it, and be assessing, is this something that I'm also finding some amount of fulfillment from? Because again, if not, maybe I should just go work a 9 to 5 or something else, rather than be pursuing this specific dream, because there's a lot more security in that 9 to 5 in some respects, right? So I think then we had our first fundraiser, and back then Kickstarter wasn't an option in Canada, so I had one on Indiegogo, and so that was kind of my first kind of major test to my audience and to myself and to my family. Like, okay, let me put it out there to my audience. I really have sunk a certain amount of time into this now. It's kind of do or die. And I just put it to my audience. I said, look, if this is something you enjoy and would like to continue to support, then I have this fundraiser. You can chip in, and that'd be awesome. If we don't reach the goal, no harm, no foul. This was never your responsibility or risk to assume. It was mine. And if it doesn't work out, then I will go pursue some other thing,
And how did you do?
We met our goals there. And I set a very modest goal. I always tried to set goals that I felt were within the range of the audience size that we had. Okay, like if 10% or like 5% of the people donated, what would that get us to? And I tried to sort of be reasonable in that respect. And so we got that in. I said, okay, so that's a proof that this could potentially support what I'm doing, maybe in the long run, as the audience continues to grow. And I think the important thing to remember too is when you do these fundraisers, you get maybe about 4% of the people who watch will financially support what you do. And I've looked at across like different fundraisers done by other YouTube channels in the board game space, and it holds true pretty much the same. It's about 4%. So I just said, okay, well, if I keep growing my overall viewership, then yes, that 4% will also keep growing effectively, right?
Correct.
As long as, again, I'm hopefully providing something of value, at the same time. So that was, basically that is just repeated each year. Each year, I've had that conversation with my wife again. I go like, all right, you willing to go another year? And are you willing to, again, to still be effectively the primary source of income for our family? This appears to be working. I think it can continue to trend in that direction if I keep at it. And I think my wife also felt that I was doing something that was a good fit for me too. I think she was rooting for my success in that respect too. Having seen me work at other jobs that maybe were a little more soul sucking than what this was, right. So she was rooting for me that way. Right. And really, I could not have done, like, Watch It Played would not exist I mean, there's a lot of people, really, honestly, who have contributed to allowing me to be able to do this, but my wife was the number one.
Of course. Yeah.
Of course, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So each year, again, a little more. I remember I had someone approach me at some point along the line. I don't know how many years it was in, 3 or 4 years in, a larger company, and they wanted to buy Watch It Played effectively.
Mhm.
And that was an interesting moment. Had this long conversation with the person on the phone. I knew them, but I didn't know them well. Just
Right.
knew of them in the hobby space, And Tim, it was weird. I couldn't figure out what it was, but the hair on the back of my neck during this conversation just was standing up. Like there was something not right, and I couldn't put my finger on it because on the one hand, it's like, here's somebody offering me some financial security,
right?
Potentially. And maybe this is the best deal I could ever ask for, kind of thing, right? And I couldn't shake, why is this not feeling right? And after I got off the phone, I think I realized what it was. Everything I had done so far with the channel had been very personal and relationship based. And here was somebody very interested in sort of going into business with me who did not know me at all. But they had money, they had a sack of cash basically, right? And I realized that I didn't want to go into business with somebody I didn't know. It's like, why aren't we doing like a small project together first to figure out if we even like each other or would even want to work together? That would be like the logical first step, And I think I've carried that principle throughout the whole channel, and the whole business is slow. I'm very slow about everything. Even bringing on my first kind of official co-host, that was a slow process. I mean, my kids were my co-hosts for a while, but then I actually brought in somebody from outside of that, right?
Yeah.
And now I'm working with Chaz Marlowe from Paradise. He's working with Watch It Played, and Paula Deming and Matthew Jude. So the channel has always sort of been evolving. I've done gameplays, I've done tutorials, I've done unboxings, previews, a series called Table Talk, where I sort of just talk about the hobby and different aspects of it. I've always enjoyed trying to do different types of things. Right now, my focus primarily is tutorials.
Right.
Because that is what sustains effectively the business.
And that was sort of the beginning of it, right?
It was the beginning of it, yeah. And the nice thing is I love doing them. Like I do enjoy making tutorial videos. So it's although it's had to become my focus to sort of keep the business sustaining, I'm fortunate because that's something I enjoy doing anyway.
Right. So let me ask you about that then, because since that was your core and you started there, and in the evolution, and now it's a system, for lack of a better term, even though we're all always growing and adapting and all that kind of stuff, improving. I would like to know, what are sort of, I'm just going to try to limit you to 3 if I can.
Okay.
But as you've learned over the years, what is it that you have learned that are the 3 key things that you have found are essential to teaching a game?
Well, I'll say one thing related to the certainly teaching on video. Let me tell you, when you teach on video,
right?
I script. I didn't script in the beginning. I script now, because I realized that my function, what I believe, my function is to teach you the game in the most efficient way possible, so you can go and have fun with your friends. It's not to hang out with me for as long as possible. It's to get you off my channel quickly, which I know maybe sounds a little counterintuitive, but in the early days, sometimes when I was teaching a game, I would wax philosophical at the beginning, or I would share banter and that sort of thing. And I realized, due to some feedback I got on some of the comments, that wasn't necessarily what people were there for. They were there to learn the game and go. So I said, how can I teach more effectively? Well, I can script it out. And it's more work, obviously, but it keeps me from going down rabbit trails, repeating myself. It allows me to reorganize the information in the most efficient way possible. So that's a rule for teaching on video, but I think it's also a rule for teaching in person as well. A lot of people, I think, when they're teaching a game, believe they're prepared to teach the game because they played the game once before, a month ago. They remember having a great time. It was super fun. And when they're inviting their friends over and they're like, yep, I'm ready to teach this, they're not really ready to teach it. They're ready to play that game and have that fun that they had a month ago. They're not ready to bring somebody else on board who knows nothing about the game and bring them up to speed, And that, I think, is probably the hardest thing about writing a rule book in the first place or making a good tutorial video, is remembering what it's like to not know anything about the game. and then rebuild all that knowledge again. So that, I think, is probably the best tool I've developed, is perhaps the capacity to forget everything I know and start from scratch when I'm writing that script. So that's one of the key things, is prepare. One of my big tips, as part of that preparation, so maybe we'll count this as number 2, is try to teach the game out loud to yourself first. Do it out loud, because you can tell yourself all kinds of lies in your own head. As soon as you try to say it out loud, that's when you'll start tripping over your words, repeating yourself, forgetting things, and it'll become all too apparent what you don't know. And that uncomfortable out loud conversation that you're having with yourself is what you were about to force your friends to endure. So then when you realize that, you can correct it. You have time now. You can go, okay,
really good point.
Let me try that again. Right. I forgot about step 2 of the 3 phases. I won't this time. And you do it a second time, and then maybe you think of something funny to say or whatever. I mean, the other thing I would say, maybe this is number 3. I don't know if these are the best, but this is another big one. When you're teaching rules, it's a lot of the time it's a big info dump, right? Potentially you're giving someone before you can get to the fun. And so I think it's important to be as engaging as you possibly can be, So put that smile on your face, elevate your voice a little bit, find a joke to throw in there every now and then. Try to keep it lighthearted, because you are asking to hold people's attention for, potentially 10 to 15 minutes. If you are talking to people and teaching them in person, my 3.5 of the tips would be, maybe don't teach everything all at once. Get people started, but coach people at the beginning. All right, I'm not going to teach you everything. This is a learning game. First games don't count. We're all going to work on this together so we all understand what we're doing. Then we can get really serious if you need to for the second game. But the first thing is, I want to teach you how to play the game, have everyone be really comfortable. Those are a few key things, I guess, Tim.
Those are perfect. I mean, those are really, really good. I mean, I got them down here: scripting, and make it efficient, of course. Do it out loud to go ahead and get it practice, so you can hear yourself as you're about to speak to your friends, which is very important. And try to be as engaging as you can. And you have obviously done that very well. And it's so nice to see that formula in action every video you make when you do that, because all of those are right there. I mean, we know you've spent a tremendous amount of time scripting, because everything is clean, perfect. Your angle, whatever you're doing, it's just perfectly clear, and you are extremely engaging. It's not a torture watching it or listening into it the whole time. It's going right through, and you're not ever being gratuitous, like throwing in jokes or doing anything unnecessarily. Right, you're staying on focus.
Maybe that's something else to mention. I think we have to be careful as gamers not to use gamer lingo again, if you're with all your gamer friends, maybe you can get away with it. But I really try to avoid it in even the videos. Like, I think I did the tutorial for Meeple, and during that video, I made a point of explaining what a meeple was, because if you're someone who just bought that at Barnes and Nobles, you don't know what a meeple is. And you could take that for granted that everyone just knows what a meeple is, right? And so, you could be spending half time and the person's just confused right from the jump. What's he talking about? Why does he keep saying meeple? What is that even? So I think it's always good to try to weed out some of the lingo where you can, especially when you're talking to someone who's maybe not as engrossed in the hobby as some of us are.
Oh, no, I would agree 100%. 100%. So I've got sort of 3 things here that sort of have to deal with gaming. Well, not sort of have to do. They do deal with gaming.
Okay.
But we have about 15 minutes left, so I want to just make sure we get them all in. So the first I want to talk about is, I was watching you on the Dice Tower one time. You were doing a top 10 of something. I have no idea what it was. But anyway, it was maybe the number 3rd game, and I believe it was Imperial Settlers. I could be wrong. But you're talking, and all of a sudden you said about how, and correct me if I'm wrong, if you remember, that they were wearing a purple Mountie jacket, and you sort of felt offended.
Oh, I know exactly. So the top 10 list was the top 10 enemies of gaming.
Okay.
Yeah, I think so, because I remember talking about. Yes, I'll let you finish your question, but I think I know what you're talking about. Yeah,
right. And then you were like, oh, and that you sort of, then, if I remember correctly, again, you were like, oh, I felt a little offended because that's such a big part of Canada. They should get it right. And then you started to realize, well, wait a second, maybe other games about maybe Chinese culture or this culture, or whatever, in the game aren't correct. So I just want you to do me a favor. Tell me a little bit about what that aha moment was, and what you think we can do better in the gaming community about that. And please tell the story correctly. Okay.
Sure. No, you're pretty close. It wasn't specifically that game. I think I was trying to give an example. I was trying to I think, help the portion of the audience that might have been listening that's maybe like me, which is I grew up a white male in a society that I was in the majority everywhere. It wasn't just white and male. I was also heterosexual, and at the time, I was also a Christian. So I was on no one's radar. I blended in perfectly with most of my surroundings. Again, in terms of the majority, in all the places I was, whether it's my workplace, school, you name it. And in the gaming hobby, I was hearing more and more frequently people expressing concerns over the treatment of their cultures in the hobby, and I wasn't getting it. It was like I had these perfect blind spots for all this sort of stuff, and I would see people getting very upset about it, and I still was not like, I don't understand. I remember there's one game in particular. I think it was a game called Gugong, but I might be getting the name or pronunciation not quite right. And it was a BGG thread where someone was saying very politely that the dress that the person was wearing, or the uniform they were wearing on the cover, was the completely wrong period compared to where that game was set. And a lot of people were jumping in there saying, why do you care? This is a minor point. That's not what this game is about. It's about moving meeples around or pieces. Like, why make such a big deal out of that? What was interesting to me in that conversation was the person wasn't making a big deal about it. They were pointing it out, and they did it, I thought, pretty politely and respectfully, and were just saying, hey, were you aware of this? And I wasn't able to sort of understand it until look, you can't really appreciate what you don't understand. Right. And I gotta be careful around this conversation, because there's a lot about this conversation that I still am ignorant of and don't necessarily have firsthand experience of. But the example I gave in that top 10 conversation was that I realized, wait a second, if someone made a game about Canadian Mounties and they had a Canadian Mountie on the cover wearing a purple serge, I would be like, what are you doing? Like, that's not what Mounties wear. And that's just a very simple little example. But I realized I would take a certain amount of umbrage at the lack of effort made by that game designer to understand Canadian culture and the rich heritage of the Mounties. So if that's how I felt over something like that, it gave me some measure of empathy for how many times so many other cultures are misrepresented casually by the other cultures that make games about their culture, you know?
Yeah, that is true, and I agree with you. But it's one of those kind of things where I love having these kind of talks, because if a board game is made up and made believe,
right?
How culturally responsible, I guess I should ask, or just propose.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? If the game isn't,
if it's entirely fictionalized, is that what you mean? Like,
yeah.
Yeah, and that's a good question. I'm not sure that I know the exact line where you cross from, hey, this is a historically representative game. Like in the case of Gugong, I think was meant to be more historically based than fictionalized.
Right.
And where you're sort of taking creative liberties to create this different and colorful world that maybe draws on different cultures. But I think this is something I'm still working through myself a little bit here, and a little bit of self-education is trying to appreciate that if the culture that you're talking about is not your own, and they tend to be a culture that doesn't have necessarily as much agency, or has historically been either mistreated or not treated equally, then the liberties you take with their culture, I think, are fraught with more problems. Does that make sense, Tim?
It does. Yeah.
I mean, you're acting from a place of kind of assumed power, and they don't have the equivalent power with which to respond to it. So then you're, as the majority, creating the narrative about what it is, and that, I think, that can introduce potentially problem areas for folks, which I think I can kind of appreciate on some level.
Yes, and the thing about it is the thing that I guess I just have a trouble with, what I guess this whole issue is, like the example you gave. This person made a comment, just a comment, and and then people like harp on him and get mad. I don't understand why the harp on and getting mad. It's kind of like, understand what that person said. Maybe just listen, but why are you getting mad? That's what I don't understand.
That part is interesting to me too, because one of the things that gets said sometimes in these conversations, like, I can't remember if this was brought up specifically in that conversation, with people going like, why are you bringing up identity politics and all that sort of thing in here? And that was something, again, that was a little bit of a light bulb moment that came late in my life, embarrassingly so. But again, I realized there was no point in my life where I was walking down the street and I had to think twice about whose hand I was holding. No one was going to yell out at me or throw something at me or make any kind of slur towards the person I loved because of their gender or whatever. If you're growing up in the communities I grew up in and you loved the quote unquote wrong gender, okay, let's say you were gay growing up, it's not so much that you were making it all about identity politics. The entire society around you was making it about it. You know, you're sitting there going like, I have these feelings that I have no control over. I love who I love, and I love this same guy, and I love this other guy. Right. I can't talk to my pastor about that. I think I would be shunned there. I don't know if I can talk to my teachers about it. I don't know if I can talk to my own parents about it. I don't see that person as the problem who's saying, hey, everybody, I want to like talk about my identity politics. They're going, you're making it so I can't talk about it. And if I do, I don't know what the repercussions are going to be. And that's when I realized some of the people that I was seeing who were upset or concerned or bothered by some of the cultural appropriation and things, I realized, of course, because this is happening to you all the time. This never happens to me. Like it never happens to me. I never have to, like, again, no one's making Mountie games with purple surges. It just doesn't happen. Like they're not getting my culture misrepresented. That I started to realize if that was happening to you every day or every other day or once a week, even if we're being generous, that starts to form your understanding of where you fit in the world. And I think that conversation I had on the Dice Tower related to, the thing about board games, I'm going to pick my character. Oh, they're all white, they're all male, or if they are female, it's chainmail bikini. We've come some direction away from that, thankfully. Right. But I came to realize that for a long time, that was like, this wasn't centuries ago. This was like a few years ago. That's all there was. Yeah. And people sometimes when they're trying to correct these problems, if you agree that they're problems, and not everyone does, but let's just say that we agree that there's some problems here. They want the pendulum to swing from wherever it is and stop dead center. You know what I mean? They're like, okay, maybe we have some problems. Let's get the pendulum back where it needs to be, right in the dead middle. But I don't think that's how, again, this is my personal feeling. I don't know if I'm right about this, but I tend to think the pendulum has to swing a little the other way before it ever comes back to rest at center. And that means some of the white guys are going to have to like deal with a little bit of pushback, because in order to get the pendulum back to the middle, we got to swing it to drag all of the rest of us to that middle again. Right. There just needs to be some understanding and listening. I just don't understand the vitriol and the anger. So, but thank you for that, because it was so interesting because I was watching this story, and when you talked about it and you said it, I was like, oh, wait, there's more, let me hear more. And it just like went on, like nobody acknowledged it. None of the other people on the panel, they just talked about other games. Okay, next. And I was like, I think it's uncomfortable. I even get uncomfortable talking about it because I don't, there's that self-consciousness of, am I going to say the wrong thing? Am I going to be misunderstood? And I think the reality is, I might be misunderstood, or I might say the wrong thing. Right. And maybe that's the risk you have to take to learn and figure out the right thing to say afterwards. But I don't know. Really, I don't think there's anything specifically brave about what I said. It's just, that was something I'd been thinking about more recently. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to verbalize it, I guess, at that time. Yeah, no, thank you. I just thought it was very interesting. That's why I wanted to talk to you about that. Yeah. So, sort of, and again, thank you for speaking about that. And again, sort of apples and oranges, but again, sort of a cultural question. And this next question comes to oh my goodness. Oh, she is just, I'm sorry. She misses you, Tim. That's is about the culture of gamers as opposed to what we term non-gamers or whatever. So the cultural aspect is about the Monopoly thing you did. Okay. Now you did it on an April 1st. So I want to sort of ask you, and I apologize, Rodney, but sort of your sincerity a little bit. And what I mean by this is because you talked about it and you were like, you were doing it as a joke to appease the gamers, but you wanted to but it was a real playthrough, this and that. But again, as far as
unawareness, because again, I admit I do that sometimes, sort of denigrate people who aren't gamers and talk low, but I make that mistake. But I want you to talk about those cultures, the gamer culture, as opposed to the non, and that whole discussion that was brought up when you did the Monopoly thing.
Yeah, can I talk about the Monopoly video? I'll try to be brief on this, but I really wanted to do a tutorial for Monopoly. Sincerely, genuinely, I wanted to. I grew up playing Monopoly. I played a bunch of games of Monopoly growing up. I played a bunch of, Parker Brothers and those styles of games growing up, and they were great. And I had wonderful times playing with them with my family and with my friends. And those are the kind of games a lot of people play. And with Monopoly particularly, a lot of people don't play that game right. They don't know what the rules are. The rules have been passed down through myth and legend mostly. And I thought, well, wouldn't it be nice to have maybe a close to authoritative, how do you play Monopoly video? I could do that maybe. But I realized if I posted that on my channel, I was concerned that the very entrenched gamers, what we might call sometimes alpha gamers in the community, would fill the comments with all kinds of negative things about Monopoly. And that then somebody coming in there who genuinely wanted to learn how to play Monopoly would see all these negative comments and go why do people hate this game? And am I wrong for liking Monopoly? And so I tried to strategize, how can I release this video and not create that negative backlash? And it dawned on me, if I released on April 1st, on April Fool's, it gives the alpha gamers, those very serious gamers who would look down their nose at Monopoly and people who play it, an excuse to kind of go, oh, it's an April Fool's joke. I get it. And haha. And so it would turn that negative comment into something a little more positive, if you will. But then the reality is that video, no one knows it was on April 1st now. You know what I mean? Someone coming to the channel today, that was lost on them. Right. I knew that would sort of solve the problem of that day and that initial launch of the video, and then it wouldn't matter. And that video, I think some of my favorite comments have come from that video. People who watch the video and then are like, so hold on a second, what happens if, and they'll ask some Monopoly question, and right. And these are people who are, especially, obviously didn't know COVID was going to happen, but there's a lot of people now who that's the games they're pulling off their shelf, right? And so they're trying to play and they're having trouble with the rules and they're watching the video. They may have an extra question. And I love being able to help people with that sort of thing. So I understand why people don't like Monopoly. There's certain things I don't like about Monopoly anymore. Player elimination, the roll and move. I think there's better ways of putting those kind of mechanics in games for me now, today. But I don't think there's anything wrong with someone who loves playing Monopoly and wants to play it 100 times with their friends and family. That's great.
Not at all. So in your response, you wrote, what is it that we, and what I mean, our gamer culture, right? What I'm talking about. What do we need to do more to make sure we speak properly to non-gamers, don't say things that are, you know what I mean? What can we do?
A lot of it for me comes down to remembering the subjectivity of gaming. Gaming is an experience. And I know that after you play a game, you might have a strong reaction one way or the other. I love this game or I hated this game, but that is based on so many factors. And your experience, even if you play the game 10 times, your 10 experiences are subjective. And there is no one way to view that game for everybody. For you, yes. For you as an individual, you can say, this game's not for me. Here's why I don't like it. It's rotten. It's horrible. But for somebody else, you should allow them to experience the game. And if they're enjoying it, let them enjoy it. Here's a good example of it. I often see this happen on social media forums. Someone will post a picture of a game they just bought. It's all set up on the table. And I don't know, it doesn't matter what the game is. Game X, right? They set up on the table. They're super excited. They post a picture of social media. Hey, everybody, I'm getting ready to play Game X. Wish me luck. And then the comments start filling up with people going, you know how to play that game? Throw it in the trash because that one sucks. You've got somebody who's excited and pumped about this new game they just spent their money on, that they're getting ready to enjoy. And the best that we have to offer them is to quickly come in and tell them how terrible that game is. It really, I find this very frustrating, Tim, because it's fine, again, that you don't like the game. This is not that no one's looking for your opinion. I don't know. I'm not looking for that opinion, I guess, is what I'm saying. And I don't think we're doing the hobby any favors by being so enthusiastic to let everyone know how much we don't like things. I don't think we're actually helping anyone. If you're having a private conversation with someone, they're like, I'm thinking about buying this game. Should I or should I not? Sure, offer your thoughts about why you didn't like that game, maybe why they might like something else more. I get that. But this sort of blanketing statements about this game's overhyped because I didn't like it and other people did, or, this game's not worth your time. Again, these broad community statements, I'm not a fan of it. I think it doesn't help the community, and I don't think it actually is contributing. It's just noise to me. It's just noise.
Yeah, and we do all need to pull back and be more aware of it. And again, like I said, I'm guilty of it. I try really hard, especially since I own a board game cafe.
Yeah.
And that's the majority of my clientele. So I have to be really cognizant of making sure of the way I speak about games and about like that. So
and I fall prey to it too, believe me, because sometimes I play a game I really don't like it, and I become very convinced that I'm right about my opinion. But again, I'll run it. There's games I hate, Tim.
Yeah,
and other people love them.
That's true.
And their enjoyment of that game is no less sincere than my dissatisfaction with the game. It is no less sincere.
Right.
So.
Yeah. No, that's true. You're right. It's no less sincere. And I'm sorry, Rodney, because we're out of time. I don't want to take up too much of your time. But there's one more thing I did want to get. And again, I could sit here and talk to you for hours. So much for doing this. But the third thing I want to get to, and this is sort of a segue from what you just had mentioned, is also I've been watching how you've been very active and vocal about this good review equals honest review.
Right. Or negative review equals honest.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Backwards.
Yeah.
Negative review equals honest review.
Right.
So do me a favor and talk about that a little bit, okay?
Sure. Yeah. No. Something I've noticed. It happened recently, but it's been going on for a long time. If someone comes out with a particularly negative review towards a game, I notice that the viewership response tends to. You'll see a greater percentage of people saying, "Wow, thank you for your honesty. Really appreciate your integrity," in response to the review, because it was negative. And I feel like that's a false equivalency, because I don't think someone being negative about a game is inherently any more honest than someone who really liked a game explaining why they liked it. But I think there's something that goes on in the human psyche that goes, oh, if you're trashing it, then you must really be being honest. And I understand where that comes from, because I think we're all prone to being a little skeptical when someone tells us how great something is. We kind of go, well, can it really be that great? And we've all been disappointed by getting a sales pitch that didn't live up to the presentation. But I think it is a slippery slope, and it can kind of take us from healthy skepticism into sort of poisonous cynicism when we make decisions like, well, if they're being negative, they're being honest. Because there's lots of reasons to be negative that are not founded in honesty, frankly. But I'm not accusing anyone who's negative. Like, if there's reviewers out there who've been negative about a game, this most recent example was a positive review that came out for Tellstones, and then a negative review that came out for Tellstones. And I don't think either of the reviewers were being disingenuous. I just thought, as an example to us as consumers of this content, as viewers, I think it's valuable to not fall prey to the trap of going, oh, they were negative, therefore that person's being honest. Because the person who actually said they really enjoyed the game ended up getting a bunch of negative comments from people who'd seen the negative video and were saying, there's no way you can like this game. This game's terrible. I saw a review that said it's terrible. So you must be being disingenuous when you're saying that you liked it. And that was especially difficult for me because I knew the reviewer who was being positive, and I've known about their opinion about this game for a long time. So I felt very convinced they were being very genuine, and that people had sort of this blinders on because they're like, I can't understand how you like the game. It's like Monopoly again. It's this conversation sort of cycling again. If someone plays Monopoly and they really enjoy it, you could come in and tell them how wrong they are for liking it, but it doesn't change the fact that they enjoyed it. A good example of that is you might have somebody who's like studied music. They studied all the classics. They understand musical theory. They understand the combination of notes, the history, and everything else. And they could come in and they could play a beautiful piece of classical music to you, and you could feel nothing, despite the fact that they might be able to tell you why this is an incredible piece of music. You'd be like, yeah, I know, but I really just kind of prefer this Taylor Swift song. Like you can't. There's certain things we cannot rationalize so cleanly like we can with math. A game is an experience. And if you have a positive experience, then you're going to have positive feelings towards it. And if you have a negative one, you have negative feelings towards it. And some of those negative and positive things could change. Play it 10 times, the 11th time it could change again. Or the reasons you're being negative could be because of a bad pizza you had the day before, or any number of things, you know. So I guess what I'm saying is I prefer fewer assumptions to be made about people's integrity based on those factors, whether they were negative or positive. I mean, there are ways to measure people's integrity. I don't think that's the way to do it. And I would caution people against trying to do it that way.
Right. No, thank you. And I was very good, because I just thought that was interesting when you brought that up. I read, your thoughts on it, what you wrote about it, and all that kind of stuff. And it is. And again, I mean, that's who we are, right? Gamers, like we.
Well, we get in our camps, right? And like, I love having a jovial, kind of friendly banter about some certain things, like why do you like that thing, and having that wrestling back and forth about it. But I do get a little cautious about doing it too publicly in mixed company with people I don't know, where it's just kind of like we're out there. I don't know who's reading it. I don't understand how they're internalizing what's being said. So in those cases, I want to be a little more cautious about how we present our ideas and thoughts, especially when it comes to, again, questioning someone's integrity or praising someone's integrity, or whatever the case might be.
Right. And, and again, Rodney, and I just want to say that, your reputation, which is well-deserved, is a very friendly, very nice guy, not just because you're a Canadian, but no, because of who you are. And thank you for that, because again, we all love gaming. We all love the positivity. We love, all the good stuff. And again, so, we talked a little bit about, cultural correctness in here and things like this. Just right. There's no need to get mad or upset about things we're talking about. They're just conversations and stuff, and they're all part of the daily lives we live, the things we go through, along with our love of games. So let's try to be a lot nicer, right? I think is sort of a thing we can all agree on, right?
I mean, I think it's ultimately what we all want, right? We want people to be nice to us in return. I think a lot of the times, a lot of these conversations we end up having, especially around like the cultural aspects as well, is it is rooted in that same sort of thing of like, well, I want you to treat me fairly and equally and nice, and some of those issues I think are issues that are worth getting a little upset about sometimes. Whereas whether a Euro is better than an Ameritrash game, I don't want to fight about those things. I want to save my anger and my frustration for slightly more serious topics if we can,
Yes, absolutely. But you know what? I've gone a little bit long, and I apologize. I really appreciate, Rodney, you taking the time to do this with me today and sharing about you, about your thoughts, about the Watch It Play, the channel, and all that kind of stuff, especially about Canada too. With the audience. But before we go, if you would, I'd like you to go ahead and just talk a little bit. Let everybody know what Watch It Played is, what your channel is, what you deliver, pretty much everything. Give me a big, broad commercial about everything Rodney Smith.
Okay, will do. So yeah, if you'd like to find a catalog of, I think, over 300 games now. I think it's over 300 games, full tutorials for 300 different games plus. You can go to youtube.com/watchitplay. I think you're seeing it there on screen. Yeah, that's the YouTube channel. You can subscribe there if you'd like. Click that little bell icon so you get notifications. And what you'll see going up on the channel right now is regular tutorial videos, but we also have additional content as well. So right now, my good friend Chaz Marler is doing work with the channel as well, and he's producing these fantastic top 10 videos. You might be used to top 10 videos where it's like my top 10 favorite games to play while I'm sailing on a boat, or whatever specific types of genre. These are a little more broad. They tend to be centered around the particular month we're in. And we'll pick, like, we have one top 10 that's like the top 10 climbers. These are games that are sort of gaining people's attention right now. And so we'll lay out those 10 games and sort of why people are sort of attracted to it. Then we have another top 10 that's called On the Radar. These are games that are maybe some you might know, some you might not know, but they're things that are kind of on our radar for a variety of reasons. Sometimes it's because something big's happening in the hobby around it. Sometimes it's a personal pick. And then the other top 10 is sort of underdogs. These are games you maybe haven't heard of, but we think are worth your attention. So our hope there is to create a top 10 that is both informative, but also entertaining as well. So we usually weave some storylines throughout these top 10s that sometimes carry over from episode to episode with the different hosts. And we also have a news show as well. Every second Friday, approximately, we have a Cult of the News show where we just talk about news in the board gaming hobby. And these shows are hosted by Matthew Jude and Paula Deming and Chaz Marler, and sometimes I appear in them as well. And it's been great to be able to expand the channel to have that kind of content. And we do the occasional gameplays. We have live shows as well. And I'm working on bringing the gameplays back to the channel. We haven't had them for a while, But I am strategizing on how to make that happen so that the channel, which is called Watch It Played, can still, once again, allow you to watch it played. But in the meantime, I hope you enjoy like the rest of the content. If people are looking for me on social media, I'm pretty active. You'll find me on Twitter at Watch It Played, and Instagram, and on Facebook, and those sorts of places. And it's very kind of you to let me plug. Can I just give one little plug to you, Tim? Just one little plug, because I've been watching a series that you've been making, and I love it so much. And I want people, if they tuned in for this episode, to maybe check it out. It's called Chronicles of Small Business, or Small Business Chronicles. Is that right?
Uh-huh.
You have 4 episodes out right now, and it's sort of detailing your journey in creating the business that you have, right, with Meepleville and your cafe. Mm-hmm. And I love that you started. A lot of people sometimes they'll approach me about starting a YouTube channel, and they'll say like, "What equipment do I need to buy? What camera should I get? What microphone do I need?" And those are not bad questions, but I think they're the wrong questions initially. Mm. I think the questions you need to be asking about is like, what is it you're hoping to get out of it? What is it you're trying to do? How's this going to affect the people in your life? And that's exactly where you started in your conversation. And you've gone from things like that to very practical things about business plans and all the rest of it. I think anyone who's interested in just following your dreams in practical ways should watch that series. I've been fascinated by it. I'm going to keep watching it. I really enjoy it, Tim. Sorry, I know you didn't want to plug it. I just had to, because I tell you, I love what you're doing with that series. And I really appreciate that you're being so gracious as to share your experience, because that will help other people maybe avoid some pitfalls that they might otherwise fall into. I think you're doing something really, really helpful there. So I appreciate it anyway. And I've also found it very entertaining. So
yes, well, thank you, Rodney. I appreciate it. And there you go, folks. You can see how nice he is, right? Always nice.
You got to plug on your own channel.
Yes, I did. I got to plug on my own channel. But again, Rodney, thank you so much. Don't go away. I'll be right back with you. But I really appreciate you spending time with us here today for Meepleville Meets.
Well, thanks for the invitation. It was a real pleasure, Tim. I appreciate getting to know you a little better too. It was great.
Absolutely. Well, there you go, folks. And as you saw, we had, as you can see, one of the very nicest, genuine people in all of gaming. Please make sure you go ahead and check out Watch It Played on YouTube to see all the different variety of content that Rodney has on his channel. And again, thank you for watching us for another episode of Meepleville Meets. We'll see you soon.